Ahoy everyone, it's Jeff, aka Godless Scummer. Welcome back to my channel. I've got a very special guest with me today. His name's Jeff Schoep, and he's got quite an interesting story to tell. But I'm gonna just preface this for anyone who might stumble in on this. I'm gonna give the trigger warnings for this now, because it's a very good possibility we might talk about some subjects that are quite controversial, and but they need to, these, so just a little warning there for the beginning. So Jeff Schoep, Jeff was for 27 years member of the largest neo-Nazi organization in the United States, and for around 25 years of that, he was actually, you were top boy, weren't you? In there, you were the leader, pretty much, of the National Socialist movement. Jeff is now out of that ideology. He now works with a non-profit called Beyond Barriers, which works at getting people out of extremism, not just on the far right, but the far left, and religious extremism as well. So, Jeff, welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, and I love that intro. Rock and roll and demolitions. You can't beat that.
Yeah, mutual. This is you obviously know our mutual friend Ed. So it's a mutual friend of ours who made that intro for me. I'm pretty sure she's done some of Ed's stuff as well. So, so how are you today? I'm
doing great. Thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah. Rather hot, boiling day here in the UK today. We've got very humid. So I guess I'll jump in with I guess really right. Let's start at the beginning. How did you become radicalized into like far right politics and neo-Nazism? I just think it's a good place to start.
Well, it goes way back. From a very young age, and everybody has different reasons why they get involved in this type of thing, and anybody's susceptible to it. A lot of times you hear people say, well, for various reasons, they want to place everything in a box and say, well, this person came from a bad home, or they had trauma, and those factors do apply, but they're not constant. It's not with everyone. For my own trajectory and experience, I came from a good home. I grew up in rural Minnesota, United States, for the people overseas. But I came from a good home. But my grandfather fought in the Third Reich. My mother and grandparents were German immigrants, and my grandfather fought in the Third Reich. This ideology wasn't pushed on me or anything growing up. In fact, it was discouraged. But as a child, I was fascinated with it. I was fascinated with the history, and that kind of started my trajectory, is because I was reading books, I was watching all these old documentaries, and I was just fascinated with that aspect, unfortunately, of German history. And I fed into it, and I pursued joining the movement as soon as I could find it. So I had searched for it as a teenager, got involved in my teens, and within a couple of years of joining the National Socialist Movement, I was appointed to run the organization nationally, and stayed there for 25 years as the national leader until I walked away and do the work that I do now.
Yeah. So I mean, just so people perhaps don't know, just tell us a bit about the National Socialist Movement, because this is one of the this is one of the really big groups on the far right in the United States, from the reading I've done. So I don't know if you can just tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. Basically, when I was looking for an organization, I had written to, and back then we're talking before the everybody was on the internet and all that. So I was writing, when I say not emailing, I was writing all of these different organizations, trying to find something that was the closest to what I felt would be the closest to the German National Socialist movement or the Nazi Party. And that would have been the National Socialist movement. At that time, the organization was fairly small, but it had the historical ties to the original American Nazi Party of George Lincoln Rockwell. So it was founded by a couple of his deputies and back in 1973, 74. And so it was a very old organization, a historic organization. By the time I had joined, it was very small. It was just within a couple of 2-3 states, I think, at the time. And I'd gotten active in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis area, became a local group leader, and rose up through the ranks, basically, and was highly active in street demonstrations, activism, passing out literature and things like that. And then going forward into the future there, basically the organization was doing all kinds of things. It was producing podcasts, it was producing video games, White Power record label, different things like that. Anything you could imagine in the propaganda sphere, producing videos, DVDs, all of that sort of thing. The organization was involved in that, and became the largest organization of its kind in the country by the time I left. I don't know where they're at now as far as size and that sort of thing. It seems like their membership is down, but that's only I can only see that from the outside looking in now. But it had become the largest organization of its kind. So the work I do now is to try to repair some of the damage done from the past.
Yeah, I mean, I just, on a sort of side note, because I mean, there are probably, I imagine it's quite a few, sort of groups along similar lines, or Nazi groups in the United States, but of varying sizes and so on. I'd imagine. I mean, if you have to have a rough guess, and how many sort of organizations do you think there are like that in the United States? I mean, I know it's very difficult to quantify, because you probably got some with like half a dozen members or whatever, but to the best of your knowledge. Yeah.
It's really difficult to say. I mean, there is organizations that track that sort of thing, and they'll say, there's a lot of times they will credit an organization, and you say half a dozen, and it sounds funny, but some of these groups are one person. Some are very, very small, and they're credited as being organizations and things like that. I remember one of the things that I would do is I'd go all over the country and I'd speak at different events, not just for the at the National Socialist Movement events, but sometimes Ku Klux Klan events, other white nationalist events, skinhead concerts, things like that. And I remember being at a Klan event one time, and there was Imperial Wizards, which is your national Klan leader. They're representing different clans, and it was one guy. It was basically one or two people. So even half a dozen is a very generous estimate for some of the groups. So
yeah, I'm gonna say, because I've obviously been around, shall we say, the other end of the political scale. And I mean, like, there's an old joke about, look, one communist is a communist, two communists is a party, three communists is a schism. If you've ever seen the Monty Python film Life of Brian and the People's Front of Judea, that is pretty much the left in a nutshell. So in a lot of respects. But I mean, one of the things you touched on this a little bit with like the propaganda and so on, and I guess that would lead into obviously the recruitment element. I mean, I would guess the National Socialist movement, they're well more slick and organized than or what I would have imagined going into this, just listening to what way. Because I listened to some where you talked about recruitment, and it seems like there's quite a sophisticated recruiting machine in this.
Yeah. There was I think a lot of people don't realize how complex it was, and you just simply don't have people that have left. There's a lot, there's a number of formers speaking out in this day and age, and which is fantastic. We need every single one of them. But as far as a national leader, at least in the United States here, I'm the only national leader that's ever left and spoken out against this type of stuff. So a lot of them don't have that knowledge of how the groups utilized propaganda, how they did different things. And there was all kinds of aspects of it that I think a lot of people don't understand. With the National Socialist movement, back in the days that I was there, we were having all of the leaders, anybody that was any sort of leadership position or that was running any department in the organization, was signing non-disclosure agreements. As far as I know, that was the only white nationalist organization in the country that was doing that sort of thing. Like, basically, if you were working for Apple Computers or something, to sign that, because it was to protect what was going on in the organization, protect the members from being outed or doxxed or things like that. So
Yeah.
it was a propaganda machine. I mean, as far as podcasting, putting out leaflets and things like that. So I want to take that knowledge and that experience, that unfortunate lived experience, and put it to use. And we're doing that now with Beyond Barriers and trying to basically reverse osmosis the trend.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, you just jogged my memory when you said about preventing like doxing, and I know it's something I'll always remember that happened a number of years ago with the far right in Britain. I'm sure you remember the British National Party when they were becoming quite I wouldn't say, should we say, a not insignificant force in British politics. And it's something I can't remember quite how it happened, but there was a massive dox of all of their members that went around the internet, and I'm not quite sure how it happened. And somewhat one inside leaked that, but so I guess that sort of thing happens, but so I guess you're in this you're in this for a long time. How does the process of you beginning to leave, come away from this ideology begin? Because obviously it's not like a thing where you just wake up one morning after years of this and say, no, this is all nonsense, I'm done with this. I imagine that's quite a I imagine that's quite a process, that whole coming out of de-radicalization.
So, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Just wondering if you could sort of speak to that. So
sure. I mean, it's definitely a process. Everybody's different. Some people, there's no set time. A lot of times you'll hear people say, well, it's going to take this long. There's no set time, because some people, there's guys I know, guys and ladies that are out, that have been out for 10 years and they still struggle with certain things. There's other people that get out and they can process everything in a number of weeks. It really just depends on the individual, and everyone's affected differently, whether it's by trauma, whether it's by PTSD from their time there, or from before that. There's a lot of complications to it, but disengagement is what we like to see first. In my personal trajectory, I was de-radicalizing before I disengaged. I didn't realize I was de-radicalizing, but was radicalizing during my time the last few years that I was in the movement. I didn't realize it, but that's how it was happening. But what we like to do, and the best way to do it, is get someone to disengage. If they're active, if they're just online activism, that sort of thing, and not with an actual group of people where they're being propagandized, I think it's a little bit easier. But when you're part of a group and that's your family, that's your organization, it's all encompassing, and that's the concept of beyond barriers, is basically that you've put up the barriers. It's like being in an echo chamber or in a bubble, but you're stuck behind these barriers, and the barriers are in your mind. You've put them there, you've put them up, and now you can't see the humanity of the people that are on the other side of that, the so-called others. You're othering people all the time. It's like those people are against us. You feel like basically you're at war with the world, not just all of the other races. And we're talking about the far right in particular, but this type of radicalization can apply to far left. It can apply to religious extremism, jihadism, cults, even to a lesser degree, gangs as well. But it's very all encompassing. So to disengage from the organization that you're with is the preferable way to get somebody out, and tapping into their humanity is really where it's at. And that's what we found to be the most effective. It's not to approach these people and say, you're wrong, you're stupid, how can you believe in this crap? That doesn't work. Usually when you do that, or if you dox somebody, if you punch a Nazi in the face, that sort of thing, that just further radicalizes the individual. Now, I mean, there's an argument on the other side of that where some of the people that are involved in the doxing and stuff say, well, that's not true because this person left. And I do know of about 4 or 5 people. You could count them on one hand, but in the entire country, I can only think of about 3 of them. We don't talk names or anything like that because people's privacy is important, but just a handful, like no more than 5 in the entire country. And I know hundreds of people that are out. Only about 3, 4, 5 that have left because of doxing. And those people were not ideologically deeply involved. They were just kind of fringe players that, were coming in and out or things like that. Your ideologue that's deeply involved in this, if you dox them or that sort of thing, because that was done to me a number of times over the years. Anytime I would get a visit from the feds or the police, or I got doxxed or I got hit or got in a fight or anything like that, I was like, all right, I'm going to double down. I'm going to do twice as much now. That was how I responded to it. As far as being pushed.
Yeah. See, I mean, I suppose this is a good little time to segue, because we were having a little chat about this before we went online. Because I've been like an anti-fascist activist for a couple of, I've worked with a couple, been around a couple of groups in the UK: Unite Against Fashion, Hope Not Hate, Stand Up to Racism. I've done a couple of their events, but I mean, and I guess this is what because there's always been a real debate amongst people who are anti-fascist campaigners themselves about tactics. You've got the more like radical, the more militant ends of it, which is like anti-fascist action or stuff, or I guess is it like Antifa you've got in the United States, isn't it? And then you got perhaps more people. The people with you've got to have slightly different trying to get more of a broad campaign rather than like just militants out, and which I've personally always felt that more broad campaigning worked more effectively. But one of the things that I was thinking about this a lot actually over the last day or two, when sort of knowing I was going to be talking to you, that where we always had this policy of don't ever let them march unopposed. I kind of think that even in the times where we actually may have demoralized them on the day, we only really, even if you demoralized them enough that they weren't going to march for a long time, you'd only really treated the symptom of the problem. And the problem really is they're still in. We didn't change anyone's minds with it. We may have knocked the confidence to get out and march, and perhaps, the immediate problem of, should we say, people getting out and doing harm on the streets or something. But, this I thought about a lot of the time, and obviously something that was a big shake, really kind of shook me in my whole approach to it, was Charlottesville. And we know what happened there, and it's like, okay, things just got taken to a whole new level here. You get where I'm saying with this? Well, this is a bit of a game changer for me. So I guess, to sort of, should we say, more traditional anti-fascist campaigners, what would be the best piece of advice you could give to them?
Well, that's a complicated issue, as far as going forward. But I can say, as a former propagandist and somebody that was, for years trying to work on hearts and minds and things like that, as through negative ways doesn't work, and that can be applied across the board. Going out there, and I can just say from experience, a lot of times get asked about this sort of thing quite a bit, and I can tell you from experience, as far as the National Socialist movement was concerned, we were very concerned always about remaining legal, because we knew the government was watching. We knew that the hammer would be dropped on us if we got out of line or did anything illegal. So during marches and protests and things like that, in all of the years that I was involved, not one person, plenty of people from the organization have been arrested for different things outside of the organization, but at marches and demonstrations, not one member of the NSM had ever been arrested or charged as far as the fighting and violence and things like that, because it was always done in self-defense. Our tactic basically is, if you get attacked, then you defend yourself. And in those cases where there was violence, the morale of the organization, of the members of the organization, went way up. So whenever there was violence, like what happened in New Jersey, and I think it was 2009, and we had video of the street fighting and some fighting in California, Arizona, in different places, organizational numbers skyrocketed at those times because we utilized the videos and put out the propaganda. People that didn't show up, street activists anyways, that didn't show up would say, "Oh man, I missed out. I'll be there next time." So it increased the morale. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, and they don't think about that, but that increased the morale of the individuals. And even critics on the far right that didn't like the organization, when they saw us out there fighting, they were like, you know what, I like that. Maybe next time I'll be there, or our organization will be there, or things like that. Or it gave us a different level of respect. So I think it's counterproductive in that sense to go out and fight with them. On the flip side of that, because a lot of people say, well, if you don't oppose them, if you don't oppose the other side, then you'll look complicit, or to look like that people accept it. I can give you an example on that too. We were in a city in Mississippi, and typically the police keep both sides separated, so there's not violence. So the violence is limited to certain events and things like that where there's not police presence. But when there's police there, when there's planned marches and rallies and demonstrations, with the exception of Charlottesville, because for whatever reason, the police there did not intervene. And that's ongoing, and I'm sure that's going to come out in ongoing court cases. But that was an anomaly. That was not typical. And in fact, 3 or 4 weeks before that event, there was a Klan rally in Charlottesville, and the police did keep both sides separated. So, I mean, this is just common knowledge that across the country, when these type of demonstrations happen, the police are there to keep the sides separate, because if they're not, there's violence. It's just how it goes. And but back to my example of Mississippi. So we were at this demonstration in Mississippi, and it was NSM and it was the Klan, and the morale was lower. And this was towards the time in the organization, one of the last few years I was there. I don't remember the exact year, but the members of the group and the Klan, they were very demoralized, because for whatever reason, we believe the police kind of blocked off the area and didn't let people in. So you had just some people from the downtown area there that were there, a few reporters, and mostly just cops. So basically, we are spewing this hatred, we're spewing this garbage to no one. There was no audience. There was nobody throwing rocks. There was nothing going on. And people, as the leader of the NSM at the time, I'm hearing people go, man, this really sucked. This is a terrible event. I wish it could have been like New Jersey where we got to fight. This is horrible. And I'm thinking, oh no, we're going to have trouble getting people to come to our next demonstration. So as the leader, I'm thinking, what do we need to do to avoid another rally like this, because people won't show up? So these are things people don't think about because they don't have that insider knowledge, or they don't realize that that's how it works. But it's an interesting concept if you look at it from a psychological perspective.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so the marches that I always used to sort of enjoy being part of was more, just like I said, very broad, and the whole thing was get many, many more people out and make it, but it was a bit more of a party atmosphere, and it was, I mean, when you've actually got the side outnumbered sort of 8-1, but it doesn't need to, there just doesn't need to be violent. You can make your point that hey, you're not welcome here, but you don't have to be violent about it. And I always found that way more effective. And because I mean, what I said, I suppose the genesis of what what I suppose is similar to what Antifa is now, and is that we used to have groups that we used to call it squadism in the UK on the left. That you'd have these, and it was sort of developed in the, I suppose, late 70s, and as a method to combating the National Front, who were quite a big far right group in the UK at the time. I'm sure you've probably heard of them.
Yep.
But and I think in even in years that have sort of that have passed, even some of the people who developed that tactic have become very critical of it now and said it doesn't work. That it was it might have been it may have worked for a specific one-off situation or something, and but it's not to me it's not a long-term viable strategy for breaking far right to me, and I'm sure I've probably just lost about every anarchist friend I've ever had for saying that right now, but that's kind of how I feel. But yeah, I mean, because I was listening to you sort of say this on earlier today when I was preparing for this, that you saying that, yeah, we loved it when Antifa turned up. It would, we absolutely loved it. It played into our hands, and that was definitely something. That's why I really wanted to talk to you about this, because that was a real sort of takeaway. That I got.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, no, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I just thought of another, and people ask about this, and this is a good. I think this is a good tactic, and this is something that there was different tactics that the people would come out and do when they would oppose us. But you're right. When we got into it with Antifa, even if it wasn't violent and it was just screaming and hollering, the guys loved that. I mean, and I say guys, ladies, whatever, they loved that. But I'm thinking back to another demonstration. I think it was 2016 in Rome, Georgia, and the community came out to protest. And they came out there, and there was all these people on the protest side. And as soon as the NSM started speaking, the audience on the other side all turned their backs and just stood there, with their arms crossed and their backs to us. And then in like a timed thing, I don't know if it was a minute or however long it was, but they all stood there with their backs to us, like, hey, we're not going to hear this. We're not listening. And then just quietly walked away. Now, there was still Antifa and people like that stayed and screamed and hollered and things like that. But the vast majority that came out, I think probably from some of the church groups or whatever community organizations that came out, just walked away, and this huge crowd just walked. I thought, wow, now that was moving. It didn't deter us, but I think it sent a message where the press and anybody else that was out there watching, and us, because at first it was like, wow, what a big audience. Those must be a lot of supporters because they weren't screaming and yelling. That's what I remember thinking at the time. And then they all walked away. It was pretty demoralizing if you think back on it. So I think that was a heck of a tactic, and it showed that, what, our community is not going to put up with this. We don't agree with it. We don't like this, and we're walking away. And I thought that was powerful, and it was timed, and it was done very well in that sense. So um, that was I think there's something to be learned from that.
Yeah, yeah, that is quite I mean, that is quite powerful. I mean, I mean, the last one I was really around was in 2016, and it came right off the back of Brexit. Now, there was a march called by a far right group, and I think they were some sort of split from the English Defence League. And within a few days, we were just trying to get a counter protest. We got about 1,500 people up there, and then it turned out that this big far right march turned out to be 10 people. And I think they just sort of took one look and you know, it took one look and like, no, we're going. The whole vibe was more of a party atmosphere, and like I said, it didn't need you didn't need to punch anyone. It just didn't. It didn't need to happen. But I think the whole thing, as I was saying earlier, is that I think in a lot of ways what you're trying to do is more important because a lot of the tactics, even if I've been talking about, even if they're successful, they're treating the symptom rather than the problem itself, which is how do we change people's minds, which is you know, how do we change people's minds about this ideology? And I think that's where I think, you know, that I do think is an area that perhaps a lot of anti-fascist sort of groups don't look at as much as perhaps they should be looking at, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know if that's something you'd agree with or not, but
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that goes overlooked because the initial reaction is hey, if there is racists coming to my town, you know, I want to go out there and I want to scream and holler, I want to fight them and that sort of thing, because that's just human nature, I think, is to say, hey, this is wrong, I don't like it. But having the knowledge and experience of having been there and understanding it, I think what a lot of people don't understand, and I'm doing the work that I do now, I feel like I'm constantly having to fight back wrong opinions and beliefs about a lot of the people that are in it, because you have this narrative and you had people for years that have come out and they've said things like, well, I got involved in the movement because I hated everybody. I just hate, and they just dwell on that. And I want to preface that and explain that that hate is developed in these movements. It's definitely, you know, there's definitely a lot of hate in there. That's the truth. But it is not the motivating factor that gets most people involved. You know, as somebody that was running an organization for that years, we were always curious about the people that were joining, because we wanted to vet people, make sure that they were there for the right reasons. There's ultra paranoia that goes on in these movements, that about informants, infiltrators, things like that. So we are talking to the new members, we're talking to the people that are around, finding out why they would join. And it was very, very rare to find somebody that would say, well, I joined because I hate Jews, or I joined because I hate Black people. That was extremely rare. And typically, in my experience, those types, even when I was there in the movement, those types made me very nervous, because they came off to me as psychopaths, sociopaths, you know, dangerous individuals. And I did encounter a few of those over the years. Naturally, you would come across those people, but they were very few and far between. The vast majority of getting involved in this, no one just wakes up one day and says, you know what, I'm going to go join a group because I hate everybody. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. It's just nonsensical. You know, it's developed there, but that's not why. I believe too, when I was involved, that I was doing something good, that I was doing something noble, that I was going to save my people, I was going to save my country, and all these sorts of things. These noble ideals that are not noble or not honorable, but you believe it, that they are. So this is why we say. Someone said to me when I had gotten out, I said, I was talking and I was like, man, I can't believe how closed-minded I was for all those. How was I so closed-minded that I couldn't see all these other wonderful people in the world? And the individual I was talking to said, no, Jeff, you were not closed-minded. You became closed-minded. You were open-minded. And being able to tap back into that open-mindedness is what got you out. And I thought about that for a while, because I was like, at first it hit me and like kind of like, what in the heck are you talking about? This was closed-mindedness, but it was that searching for something and having that open mind in the beginning is what brought me and brought many people into movements like this. And it doesn't have to be far right, but when you get involved and you're there, that's when the barriers close around you, that bubble closes, and boom, it's slammed shut. That open-mindedness is gone. You've lost your humanity. You don't have it anymore. Basically, it's still there, but you're not acknowledging it. So you have to be able to see beyond that, get beyond those barriers, connect with that humanity, and it opens up a world of opportunities. So by punching somebody, doxing somebody, fighting somebody, it doesn't usually work. It's usually an act of kindness, an act of compassion, or just reaching them. And a lot of the people that reach out to us now, they're still involved, or they're on that fence. And I couldn't tell you how many people I've said after a conversation, you know, Jeff, even though we don't agree on everything politically, or we don't have the same beliefs, it's really amazing that we had a civil conversation. We just talked. It's unbelievable. And I said, well, why is that unbelievable? And they said, well, nobody talks anymore. They want to yell at each other or accuse and all this kind of stuff. Just having someone listen and be able to talk, I hear it constantly. It's surreal in a lot of ways, but I think that's what we have to work on here. It's dialogue, it's listening, it's respect, it's all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And also say, because I mean, so because I think you mentioned in a couple of interviews you've done that, I mean, your own process, I suppose, of coming out, kind of started with people being willing to have a conversation with you. I know you mentioned Daryl Davis. That man's a legend, by the way. But it was somebody else you mentioned as well. But that these couple of things like that sort of perhaps started that thought process in motion for you.
Yes, and there's other people too, you know, that I don't mention because they're not public figures. But Daryl Davis and Dia Khan. Dia Khan is the other one. She's a Muslim filmmaker from the UK, actually. But
I've heard of her, but I'm not. Yeah, name rings a bell.
She's incredible, absolutely incredible. And Daryl is too. And Daryl's on our team at Beyond Barriers, by the way. Fantastic and absolute legend, both musically and in this field as well. I mean, he's just absolutely incredible. But meeting them, I'd met Daryl first. And there's a lot of other people too that played a part in this, you know, that it's just these little acts of kindness and compassion, and inserting those seeds, you know, like especially when I met Dia Khan. I mean, that was the beginning of the end was Daryl, but meeting Dia Khan, that was like the nail in the coffin activism, as far as on the extreme far right. Meeting with her and her compassion and being able to working on that White Right Meeting the Enemy, which was the film that she had done on us and a number of other people, getting to know her over a period of weeks during the filming and things like that. You know, we became friends. You know, the ongoing joke between her and I was like, she's like my bratty little sister because she was always pestering me. But it was fun and it was interesting. And I feel like I learned so much from her. And in the film, in White Right Meeting the Enemy, there was a little bit of this is actually in the film where we're sitting down and she is talking about, I can't remember the word, but I think she's saying mud people or something. And she was referring to herself in this derogatory term that the movement uses. And I was kind of scowling and she was like, what's wrong, Jeff? And I said, I quit saying that term. I don't like that term. Don't say that, you know? And she's like, what, it bothers you? I said, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that term. I don't like you referring to yourself like that. And she had told me about how racism and hate affected her as a child, which was very similar to Daryl Davis's story as well. And with Daryl, he told me the story and it bothered me. It sat in my head and how he was treated as a child, how people foxed at him in a Boy Scout parade. And I'm thinking, man, if somebody would have done that to one of my kids, there would have been hell to pay.
Yeah, I remember listening to an interview with Daryl told that story. That was that was quite that must have been a horrible thing to go through.
Horrible. But
Yeah,
with Daryl as a man, you're not feeling those emotions. How am I going to explain this? But it stuck with me. But meeting Dia and hearing her story, and I'm sitting across from her. I could feel her pain, Jeff. I could feel it. I could see it in her face. I could just feel it in the air. I don't know how to explain that, a vibe, a feeling,
yeah,
whatever, but that hit me like getting kicked in that chest by a horse. It was unbelievable. And the cameraman caught it and zoomed in. I'm thankful for that now. And a lot of people that had seen that film, they said, we saw you in that film and we knew there was going to be a change. Dia knew it. And she was one of the first people I told before I'd gotten out that I was done. And he's a good friend.
yeah. So I mean, it was supposed to be. I mean, which because this, I think this will lead into what you're doing nowadays, or whatever. But this must have been very difficult thing for you to actually leave, because I said this movement was your life. And I seem to recall that you did it. You said something about you took what was called initially. You took something like if I'm phrasing this right, retirement from the movement. So it kind of meant you left in good standing initially, but this is before you obviously spoke out, which is what you said. I think you said once you speak out, there's no going back. But this must have been very difficult though, when you really are. I mean, this thing's your life. To try and walk away from that and start anew, that must be that must have been so difficult.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. Like I had said earlier in the interview, and I don't like to. I think it's important that I talk about it, but I haven't spent a lot of time on it because it is a difficult subject. But when, as I mentioned earlier, no national leader in the United States has ever walked away. So my case or my experience is but it's incredibly rare and unique. So during that time period, and you're right, I retired first. You can retire and leave the movement in good standing, but once you speak out against it, you're considered a traitor by some of them. There is no going back once you speak
Yeah,
out. You could retire and go back, but once you speak out, you can't. And I knew I was going to speak out, but I wasn't ready for it right away. And I knew it would be a national news story and all this other kind of stuff when I left. So I retired at first, and I call it, I don't even know if there's a term for it, but I call it my decompression period, because I felt like my brain had to decompress. Like I had to get my head straight and you go through this, and all formers that leave go through this to some degree or another. But as you said, this was basically my entire adult life. I was involved in this. So my business was involved in it. Everything I had done for all those years was wrapped around this. And when you leave, you lose basically your entire support network, your friends. Some people lose family. Thankfully for me, I still had my family. But a lot of people, they lose everything, and it's like
yeah,
starting over. So, and then so that period is very, very difficult. And then getting back, and you have all these fears and these worries and concerns and things like, will society ever accept me back? I had just a couple of people that I was still talking to, because there was corporate responsibilities and things that had to be still done for the organization. I'd hand back to the organization and things like that. And a couple of the people that I was still talking to were like, you will be hunted down to the ends of the earth by the Jews and by, the enemies of the movement. They will
yeah,
never allow you back, or allow you back into society. What are you doing? What are you doing to yourself? Like, and I don't think it was coming from necessarily a bad place that they were saying that. It was a sincere concern. Like, what are you going to do? they'll never, the society will never accept you back. And this is a pretty common worry or concern for people that are leaving. So, and there wasn't really any support. And that's why we started Beyond Barriers. Is even when I first started speaking out in August 2019, and put up jeffschoep.com, the website, I had all these people that were reaching out for help. I couldn't keep up with it by myself. So we started an organization to try to help them and let them know that there is support out here and you can change and you can get back.
I think that is so important. And this is, if anyone gets a takeaway from this stream. Now, obviously, I'm hang around a lot of, so say, the YouTube atheist kind of community, and it's not so much of a thing in the UK. But when I listen to a lot of people who've maybe left a religion, and certainly, as I think I mentioned to you before we went live, I've had a guy on here who was deep into the Church of Scientology for like 25 years. And I've heard an awful lot of stories about people how they've either lost their family, their friends, there's like support net, because sometimes, like in your case, your business could have been, your business is tied to that former life. And I hear those stories an awful lot from people who may have just come out of a religion or, especially a cult, which is, there's definitely a lot of parallels there. And I think it's, within, and I know a lot of within sort of the atheist communities, they have set up like little kind of communities so that people have, say, got a place to land when they come out of religion or something. And I think what you're doing is so important. You're giving people who've been in, like extremists groups an opportunity to, hey, you can come out, you've got somewhere to land. There's support out there for you. There is a life after this. And I got to say, I really think that is so important what you're doing, just with that alone.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was going to say, just anybody in the chat have any questions for Jeff? I did see, I think Dog put something in there. Do you have any regrets in trying to forget about your past, or do you use the past acts of your past as a so basically just your past, what you've done in the past, fuel what you do now, or do you just try and forget, try and put as much of the past out of your minds as possible? I think is what Dog's getting at there.
Well, it would certainly be easier to put it out of my mind. I do have, business skills and things like that I learned over those years, that I could be putting towards something else. And it would be a lot easier for me personally, and it would probably be more financially viable to do something else, and easier. It's so much easier. Like, this is not an easy thing to do, but I feel I use it as fuel. I use my past experiences as fuel to do something good, because here's the thing, like what I had said earlier about how I really believed I was doing something good and noble. And then to find out, or you couldn't see, like, there was other opportunities over those years that I just shut myself down to, and couldn't see the humanity of the so-called other. I couldn't see it because I was behind those barriers, or I was in that bubble. And that's a very common thing for people that are in cults or in far right or far left organizations, jihadi, religious extremist organizations, things like that, is they really do believe that they're doing something good. And that's where the misunderstanding is. And they're not doing something good, but to reach them and to show them, hey, their humanity is out here. You have your humanity too, and we need to tap into that. Unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath and you don't have those buffers, those people I feel like are dangerous and you can't help them. But most people, I believe, can change. I've seen it. If someone like me can change after all those years. There's another case that we have of somebody that was in even longer than I was, and we've got a few of those, but there's one in particular I would have never in a million years thought this individual would come out as somebody that I knew from the past, and they're a grandfather, they're in their 60s, and they're out, and they're completely ashamed and want to do good things now. So people can change, and I think it's important to actually be doing something good. So this is the mission's changed, but this time it's on the right side of things, and we have lots of other people that can
Yeah,
do
I
so.
know. I mean, absolutely. I was think thought to myself earlier today. Actually, I actually just thought, I had 5 years ago, someone would be telling me that I would be having a conversation with a guy who was at one time leading the biggest Nazi organization in America and enjoying this conversation, because I really am. I'd have said, "You're fucking crazy," you know. I would have said they were fucking mad that I would be having, but I mean, to give this, I'd say to, because I know I've got a few people who watch this who are British, and really to give an idea of where Jeff is, him coming out of this would be like the equivalent of the UK of somebody like Nick Griffin or Tommy Robinson coming out and saying, "I'm against that ideology anymore." That's to give that sort of a British reference. I'm sure possibly guys you've both heard of both of them.
Of
Yeah, it'd be like, David Irving coming out and saying, all that stuff I said about Holocaust denial, I was totally wrong. That is what this is. And it really kind of gives me hope that someone like you can come out. Then there's hope for anyone, really. If someone who was in you were in that position and a public figure in that movement, it's really, I think, is a story of hope. But I did see that you have. I did come across that New York Times article. I guess there was a bit of skepticism at first when you first announced, there was a little skepticism at first, I think, wasn't there, about your sincerity when you first came out?
Yeah, and that was incredibly damaging and hard for me to take. On one hand, and looking back, it's like I understand it. I guess if I was anybody else looking at my life looking in, I'd say, you know what, this guy was involved all those years. I don't believe him. I don't believe anything he's saying, and then just leave it at that, and that was one of the, and I just still don't like the word fear, but it is fear. There is a lot of fear in leaving, and
Yeah.
And really that's what it is. And a lot of people don't take that stuff into consideration, or they don't feel like someone that's been involved in these extremist organizations deserves another shot at life, or a chance to do something different. There's a lot of people that believe that. So I understand that on one hand, but on the other hand, when someone's speaking out publicly, how difficult that is, and knowing, and dangerous too. And I don't try to focus on that, because we don't want people to feel like they can't leave because of fear. So there is no going back. So that whole trajectory, or that thought, on one hand, it makes me angry, because it's like, you can't, you're out, you're speaking out. It can't be any other way. Even if you wanted it to be another way, it can't be. That's how it is. That's how life is. So when someone says, "Oh, that's not true, I don't believe that," or "He's just doing this for whatever made up reason they come up with," it's frustrating on a personal level. But on a larger scale, or from the outside looking in, and because I do understand human psychology and these type of things, I understand why people think that, but it doesn't make it any easier for me personally, or not just myself, but all those other people that are watching. Because one of the things that I noticed, and I heard it from a number of people, the people in the movement watch this stuff. They're curious about it. They watch those of us that speak out, especially those of them that knew us from that time, but even just others, hangers on and stuff. And when that article came out and I was being doubted, there was people that were contacting me and posting things saying like, "Ha ha, you see, you're never going to be accepted back by society. They don't even they don't accept you." So that's how damaging that sort of the rhetoric and thought process can be. So, and I know it's easy for me to say because I was the victim of it, I guess you could say. And a lot of other people have faced those kind of challenges too. And I guess it should be understood. But if we want people to change, and I don't know if I'm the right messenger for this because I'm a guy that was the bad guy, you know, and I'm doing good things now. But so it's easy for me to say, hey, accept me, accept others that had been in these groups and stuff because you know, we'd been there. But if we want people to change, we have to give them a chance, and we have to show them that it's possible, because that's one of the things that a lot of these guys fear getting out is there was a lot of misconceptions. One of the biggest misconceptions that I had from different people reaching out was, when you leave, do you have to become Antifa? Are you a communist now? And
Yeah.
it sounds kind of funny. And I mean,
It's like,
it's okay to laugh,
but that, yeah, I can actually understand. I would imagine is that a lot of people feel they've got to go right to the other end, and you just don't. And I actually will say this to anyone on the left watching this tonight as well. A little message to you. It's unreasonable for you to expect someone who has been part of a far right hate group to immediately come to being like a left wing. It's totally unreasonable for you to think that. Just be glad that they were out of what they were doing previously, and be happy with that. Would be just a little message I'm going to say to, because I know a lot of my viewing base is more left leaning. It's unreasonable to expect someone to go right to the other end at the extreme and become a woke warrior or whatever. Just be happy that they are out of what they were doing previously and the harm they were doing previously, and try to support these people as best you can.
I agree 100%. And we tell people all the time. At first, when I was hearing that from different people, I was like, what makes you think I'm a communist? I'll never be a communist. Why are you asking this? But I had to bring myself back, because I thought the same thing. And there is some people that will go all the way from the right to the left, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Just stay out of the extremist ends of it is what I'm saying. Like, you can be you can be conservative, you can be left wing, you can be a right wing, but don't be on those extreme fringes. You know, but your personal politics is it's okay what you want to do. But yes, we shouldn't expect somebody. And this is another thing. You could, if you flip from one form of extremism to the other, and I've seen where that I don't want to say it's common, but it does happen sometimes, where someone will go.
I've known of it. I've known. I mean, I've known as one. I've known a couple of let's just say Trotskyites who've later been on English Defence League marches or something. I have known of it to happen. Yeah. It is rare, but I have. I said it's not. And I suppose that, you know, sometimes it could, because sometimes it could be someone who's, you know, just. I don't know, for lack of a better term, a bit angry society or the world, or doesn't like what they're seeing, and you know, they're sort of looking for something. So it's probably they're generally people who said they're in one thing for a few months, then they jump to the other thing, and they're kind of trying to find their home. Is generally what I've experienced with people who do those jumps from you know, one end to the other. But like I said, that's just my own personal experience. I don't know, you know, if that's you know, what happens in all cases, but that's just my own personal experience with this. But
yeah,
so I just want to,
like that.
Yeah, I just want to sort of sum up, because just very quickly on Beyond Barriers, and there is a link to Beyond Barriers and Jeff's website and Jeff's channel in the description. Just very quickly just want to quickly plug Beyond Barriers and what it is you're doing now. I think that's a good place for us to sort of end up on.
Thank you. Yeah. So Beyond Barriers, beyondbarriersusa.org is the website. Check out our team there. We've got some of the absolute best. I feel like on this side of things, Daryl Davis is there. Acacia Dietz from England. Ivan Humble's on the site. He was former EDL. We've got Duke Schneider, Red, I know I'm going to miss some people. Lord Caraco. We've got so many different people on there that are just incredible activists. Check it out in the team section of the site. We're doing in-house research now, so we're trying to figure out the drivers and the factors on why people get involved in this stuff. We have formers meetings where we work with our friends at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and they've been very supportive of Beyond Barriers and a great organization that we are really like and think highly of. So we work with these different organizations, and we offer support to people coming out. We try to help them. We have different people, psychologists, and Fred Cook is another individual. He was the chief of staff in the NSM at one point, so that was second in command of the party. Somebody that was another lifelong activist like myself. He does all kinds of different counseling services and things like that. So we've got a great team. We're here to help, and trying to change lives and save lives. And one real quick thing, a lot of times another one of the things my critics have said about me is they say, well, he's just trying to save his old Nazi friends. I've heard that before, and I find that kind of ironic, because it's like, the reason I do this work is if we can off ramp, if we can stop the next Oklahoma City bomber, the next synagogue shooter, the next mosque shooter or church shooter, if we can stop that person and off ramp them and get them out, how many lives do we save? It's not about saving that individual. Saving the individual, bonus, that's great, but saving the innocents, that's what motivates me, because I don't want to see another mosque shooting. I don't want to see another synagogue shooting. Those are innocent people that are being victimized because of hate, because of fear, because of ignorance and lack of education. So we need to get back to the school systems. We need to prevent this stuff before it happens, and we need to start tapping into our humanity and see the humanity of one another. We've got more in common than we have differences, and a lot of this stuff and this anger and this hatred is based on ignorance. It's on lack of understanding. It's just not knowing your neighbor and things about them. So that's what we're working on.
Wow. Okay. Jeff, I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you. Thanks so much for coming on. As I said, please go and check out Beyond Barriers. Go and check out Jeff's website. And Jeff does have a YouTube channel. All the links are in the description. And I think there's a message here for you, for Jeff here. Good on you, Jeff. You've gone from one extreme to... He hasn't gone from the... I don't think you've listened, Dog. He hasn't gone from one extreme to the other. It's kind of what he's trying not to do, actually. But I get what Dog's trying to say there. But once again, thanks very much for coming on, Jeff. This has been brilliant. This has been absolutely brilliant. An honor. And I really wish you the best of luck with what you're doing, because I think what you're doing is fantastic. And even if my humble little channel just helps kind of get the message out there just to a few people, this has been absolutely worth it to have this conversation with you. So with that, I might possibly see how I feel in half an hour, do a little after show or something. If anyone wants to come and have a little hangout with me for a while, just DM me on Twitter. But other than that, I'm going to say thanks to Jeff for coming on. And I shall see you guys all later. See ya. Salute.
Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Take care.